Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of Ask NP Deidre with nurse practitioner Deidre Arms. This is for ladies only. We are taking on National Women's Health Week, and we are tackling heart disease, still the number one killer for women. We are going to hear a very personal story from nurse practitioner Deidre that is going to drive home a very important point. Get checked now, get checked early. If you want to follow nurse practitioner Deidre, make sure you go to and subscribe to her channel on YouTube, youtube.com/ the @ sign NP Deidre. You can also subscribe to the Global PAD Association's channel under our 501(c)(3) name. That's youtube.com/ the @ sign the way to my heart. We have amazing content like this just about every week where we focus on the best supplements for you, the best food as medicine for you, and we tackle all kinds of different subjects. We just have a special series. Typically, we talk to men, we talk to women, and it's just for everybody. But right now, this is for ladies only because for women, heart disease is so underdiagnosed. And so we want to talk about the signs, the symptoms, and prevention. So welcome. Thank you so much, nurse practitioner Deidre, for being here and for sharing your personal story.
I'm happy to be here. This topic always hits a little home for me in many ways. One, because of my struggle, but the family history that I have with cardiovascular disease. And I think a lot of times women, we get focused on all the things going on and don't pay attention to our own signs and symptoms. So I'm happy to talk about this.
So I think that we should first mention, why are women so susceptible to heart disease?
Well, we're especially vulnerable because a lot of times it has to do with our hormones, estrogen dropping. That's a piece to this as well, because we know women after menopause, when estrogen drops, we have a shift in our lipid profile as well. We become more metabolically unstable. And so women, especially in perimenopause, menopause, start to become really vulnerable. And that's when we start to see the increase in cardiovascular risk is after this time as well. And so really paying attention to this in our life, and it's just a vulnerable kind of area.
I was just reading an article that is talking about common household products actually being linked to heart disease deaths. And they're found in cosmetics and things like that. And I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce the name of it right because it's PHTHALATES.
Phthalates.
Oh, so it's just phthalates.
Hmm.
And they're typically found in cosmetics, detergents, solvents, plastic pipes, and bug repellents as well. And they increase someone's risk of heart disease. They obesity, diabetes, hormone and fertility issues, as well as cancer. And it was part of a new study that has linked that plastic ingredient to more than 356,000 global deaths from heart disease in 2018 alone. And these were researchers from New York University Langone Health, and they studied the DI2 or the D2 ethylexyl phthalate, or DEHP, which is used to actually make food containers, medical equipment, and other plastic products actually softer and more flexible. And it found that prolonged exposure to the chemical could cause inflammation in the arteries of the heart, which over time could, of course, heighten heart attack or stroke. And that's really concerning because just what you're doing every single day, what you're picking up in your hands, what you're possibly breathing in when you have some of these containers, right? When they're new, they do have a little bit of an odor to them. And even though you can't see the molecules, you're still inhaling them. And what you inhale goes directly into your bloodstream.
Exactly. I'm actually glad you brought up phthalates because these um, they also become xenoestrogens for women, and that's why we're seeing more of this infertility and things. It's like fake estrogens as well, which can be a whole topic on its own. But these environmental chemicals that we're exposed to, and some things we can take ownership of what's happening in our home, right? We can say, I'm not going to have plastics. I'm going to store my food in glass containers. Like these are the things I can do in my home. But sometimes when we're in our work environment and when we're exposed to restaurants, things like that, we can only do our best, right? But some of the things with the phthalates, like they're off gassing all the time. So when you're storing in plastics and really don't use it in a microwave, put it on glass if that's what you're doing in the work environment and stuff. But to minimize your risk to exposure is really beneficial.
It's so crazy because we end up getting food to go, and especially us as single women. I mean, I would imagine men more than women maybe getting the to go items when they're living single and, or, just generally busy. But the food all comes in plastic containers.
Uh, Even at the grocery store, you're seeing food in plastic containers, like um, they'll wrap broccoli in something plastic or your lettuce or something. So if you can purchase things that are like farmers market or you're going to a market where the food is just out there and you're able to purchase that way where it's not been stored in these, I mean that minimizes your risk and we can be responsible for the things that we have control over.
And here I was yesterday thinking I am going to impress nurse practitioner Deidre, and I got the biggest plastic container of spinach that you could ever imagine out of a supermarket. It was huge, but it was plastic,
Yeah.
but it was spinach. I got my greens.
Yeah. Well, and that's where we
It's
say
better to
like,
get it without the plastic. It's better to get it and wash it off yourself. But it was laziness, pure laziness on my part. And I didn't want to wash it. I wanted it pre-washed and it was nicely all divided into a container for me.
right. And we talk about like what's optimal, but what's realistic in people's lives. I would never tell a mom with 4 kids, don't get something that's easy just because it's in plastic, um, if they're trying to be healthy for their family. So what's optimal is, never covered in plastic, but what's realistic is a little bit different. So we just kind of break our life apart, and if it's going to cause you stress to purchase it and
And
wash it
stress causes
yourself,
inflammation, right?
right, right.
The
So
stress causes inflammation, the inflammation causes heart disease. So darned if you do, you don't, and darned anyway.
exactly. But yeah, I'm happy that you got a big thing of spinach, so that sounds good. I'm gonna level you up. I planted spinach this weekend in my garden. So
What?
yeah, we did a full garden, probably a half-acre garden. Did a lot of work in it, so on a little prayer here that it produces.
Wow. I think that we need to, on one of our episodes, interview Master Gardener Heather Andrews, whose husband is one of the top interventional cardiologists in the world, and she's involved in clinical research for um, for health as well. But she might be able to provide some really great advice for you and others on how to start a home garden, tips and tricks.
Oh, I would love that. Yes.
Because what you grow at home could be the healthiest and it could be the key to what helps you lower your risk for heart disease because then you're not going to the store and buying things in containers. How easy is it to walk into your backyard, grab that spinach, and then throw it in your Vitamix to make a smoothie versus having to leave the house, go to the store? I mean, you could even grab some strawberries and blueberries out of your garden. Perfect.
Yeah, I think that is great. I had a patient this week I talked to, and she travels a lot for her job and finds herself like in areas where fresh fruits and vegetables don't come in. They don't have the best weather out in the Dakotas there. And so I talked to her about doing a hydroponic garden in her home to grow some of these fresh things that she doesn't have access to. So we can all make conscious ways to kind of level up our eating and what we have access to.
Except I'm going to call you on something. Remember that interview we did on regenerative farming, and they talked about how it's in the soil that you get those nutrients. Do you get those
Yes.
same nutrients in hydroponics?
You don't, but like she
It's better than
explained, it would
nothing.
be hours before she could get access to something, and that they actually bring it in on rail. There's no like trucks coming in. And so, in that situation, I'm like, this is something that you could do. Obviously, so yeah, planting in the soil, things like that. But she didn't have access to a yard even. So I was like, what, how could we make this? What can we do?
You got to work with what you have and do the best you can, and that's really what's key, especially for so many of us women that are trying to balance our own lives, our careers, our families, not only our families with our kids, but also our parents and other family members that may need our help. Everyone, we tend to go in all different directions, so whatever we can do to make things more, you know, easy and keep our sanity, that's really what's key. I mean,
No,
if we have a few plastics here or there, but it's really just we overuse is where we started the conversation. The
yeah.
overuse of plastics that contain that harmful chemical, the phthalates. And so we just need to be a little bit more conscious of it. If you can choose glass, choose glass. We had a gentleman on our show just the other day, and he was bringing up the same point about the phthalates, and he picked up his glass water bottle that he was using instead of the plastic water bottles. And so there are little things that you can do to help make simple changes in your life to just reduce that exposure, because that's really what key. It's those simple steps that we can make. But back to general heart disease, I want to, because we do have a lot of women that are watching right now. I can see them online. Many of the women that are watching right now have what's called peripheral artery disease, and 3 in 5 people who suffer a heart attack have peripheral artery disease, which is blocked arteries in the legs. And the issue that I have when it comes to peripheral artery disease is that you are slowing down. You're not walking as brisk as you normally would, especially if you end up in advanced stages, and or even if you're in the intermittent claudication stage, which is the early stage, which is where you walk, you cramp, and you end up resting, and then you start walking again. There's a lot of walking, stopping, walking, stopping. There's also in your subconscious mind the thought that you're going to walk a little bit slower than you normally would, so as to not bring on that claudication, soonest. And that's not giving you the best cardiovascular workout. So while it's helping your legs, it's not necessarily helping your heart, because your heart, right, nurse practitioner Deidre, you need to get in that real cardiovascular workout, which so many of these women are not getting if they do have PAD, and they're not able to walk as brisk as they could if their legs were healthy in order to get that proper cardiovascular workout.
No, exactly. And we know that your VO2 max is a huge indicator of longevity in life. And so getting into those higher briskness where your heart is actually pumping more. I just spoke about this at a conference at a local hospital on longevity and like improving the cardiovascular health through VO2 max in your workout and everything. So getting your heart rate up, doing that aggressively, walking. Sometimes I can remember listening to one of your podcasts with Dr. Phillips, and it was on walking and PAD. And I was on the beach when I was listening, and I was like, I'm going to start stomping as I'm walking to really get the blood flow going and stuff. So there are things that we can do there. But getting your VO2 max up, and people are like, well, how do you measure that? And I found recently those rings that people wear actually can tell you if you're in a VO2 max range based on your heart rate and everything.
And what is the VO2 max? That's just is that the oxygen in your blood?
Right. And so helping that cardiology measures that when they do like a stress test and things like that, but getting you into an optimal range where we know the workout's helping the cardiovascular. And that's basically getting your heart rate up. And like you said, that more aggressive walking and that what we have to do to uh, get the blood flow to the lower extremities.
I did one of those VO2 tests because I have asthma. And I was concerned that when I'm walking, I don't feel as though I'm getting enough oxygen. I feel as though my chest is tight. And they hook you up. I mean, you have tubes upon tubes upon wires upon, I mean, I don't even know how I was even moving on that thing, but they had me running, which I typically don't run, but they had me actually running on there. And they told me that even with my asthma and my feeling that I'm gasping for air, my VO2 was maxed, and they said there was absolutely nothing wrong. So sometimes you may be getting more oxygen in your blood than you think.
Hmm. Yeah. And they pushed you to prove that to you, right? Like they push you to run or do something to really get that heart rate up and that VO2 max. And that's what we need to do, even in little spurts. Like, I'm not saying you have to go out and be a marathon runner, but anytime we can push our heart rate up to where we feel like we can't have a conversation when we're doing an exercise, that's good for our cardiovascular.
And Judy is asking, are there rings that measure the VO2? Can we get them in the UK? Because you mentioned rings. I would imagine that you can buy them right off Amazon. You have the Aura ring,
Yeah.
that is on there. My dad actually has one of those. He not only wears it during the day, he wears it to bed at night and gets a little more information on his sleep, which is very helpful because sleep apnea can lead to heart disease as well.
Yeah, I'm just exploring the different ones, but I do know the Aura Ring is the one that you're going to see more. But there are more generic ones that are similar, so you can look at that and just when you're Googling it or putting it and looking it up, just make sure you're looking for if it measures VO2 max. Definitely the sleep component too. That's so powerful. But I there are many different brands. I don't know all of them. I know of the Aura Ring.
Yeah, that one's the most. They had a really good marketing team of marketing and communications. They definitely nailed that one. So, but there are the different ones that are out there, and it's good if you look at Consumer Reports. There, I've seen some comparisons between different ones that are out there. So that's always good to take a look at. And it's also good to take a look at the customer reviews. There are some great influencers that go onto Amazon and will do comparisons for you. And they'll even do an unboxing of them and trying them out and which ones are the easiest to use because they pair for the most part, I believe, to your phone. And so you want to make sure that it has an interface that is easy for you to use because if it's not easy for you to use, great to have it, great you bought it, but you're never going to use it.
Right. It needs to be simple.
Yep. It's just like those watches. I don't know about you, but the Apple Watch, I have an Apple Watch. My mom, when she transitioned, she had one. So I just ended up starting to use hers. And the interface, trying to set that up, trying to use it has been a little bit frustrating for me. So it ends up um, on my dresser most of the time. I'm not wearing it. And I should. My dad always says, you have your walking mat in your office. Why don't you have that on there? Because I'm always thinking, well, I don't think that I'm getting the right number of steps and the accurate measure of what I'm doing. And it's not measuring in my phone. It's measuring in my phone as if I'm doing nothing all day. He's like, wear your watch.
Yeah. It's a good tool, right? It's a good tool.
And the other good tools, so as I mentioned, having a walking mat in your office, you can get them at all price ranges, which is amazing. And I discovered there is something called Amazon Overstock. And if you're on Facebook and you use Facebook Marketplace, you can search around for someone that is an Amazon overstock dealer, and I was able to get a $400 walking mat for $75. And I was just on there and I noticed that this one marketplace seller had a whole bunch of different walking pads. And I was thinking, how is that possible? Is he a scammer? And so I went with caution with a really good friend of mine to go to the warehouse. I put on my phone the find my so that my dad knew where I was as well, just in case. And I went to this warehouse in the middle of nowhere, and he had an Amazon truck around the back because I went to the wrong side at first, and I thought, okay, this may be more legit than I thought. So it turns out that with Amazon, if they have these crates, and it could be for a variety of reasons why an Amazon warehouse would not accept the stock, would not accept the crates. So they call these other people that are overstock warehouses and they say, I'll give you this truckload of whatever I have for this set price, which is usually a much lower price than the stock is even worth. And just for them to offload it so they can go back to the shipyard and go get more stock. And this guy was like, I never know what I'm going to get. And he ended up with a big truckload of all of these walking pads. And when I was there, they also had a stand up desk. And so my friend was like, well, do you have any stand up desks? He's like, well, what type do you want? I got all kinds of them. And so he's like, I have to clear this warehouse today because look in the back, there's more items that I have to clear that truck and get them into my warehouse. So it's something to look out for to get some of this great expensive exercise equipment that you might not normally be able to afford, and you can get it for your house, as I did with this walking pad. Also, because you see a lot of them on Amazon, are those hand bicycles or foot bicycles. Those are fantastic if you have wounds on your feet and you can't stand on your feet and put pressure. You need to offload. Well, you can use it is either as a hand bicycle, which my dad is having hip surgery. So I just bought him one for his birthday. He was so excited. Not, but I got him one for his birthday. So when he has hip surgery and he's in a chair for multiple weeks, he can still get a cardiovascular workout with that. But if you have wounds on your feet, you can talk to your podiatrist or wound care team and see if you can use a foot bicycle to still help you to improve your circulation.
That
So
was one of the things. I know I have a younger sister who ended up having cardiovascular disease very young and has PAD also. And one of the things is she bought one for when she works, and then we started using Metanex as well. And then her vascular person, Dr. Phillips, actually helped the legs, and she went from like only 30% blood flow to like 70 some percent, and just pushing through that. And what is it? And we're like 3 years out, and it's not going backwards. It's like she's able to walk now, and so those things like that, coupled with the right nutrients, coupled with the right providers, like you can improve things for this walking. And
that's incredible. That's really inspiring to hear. We might have to get an update from her. I know we interviewed her at one point, so that would be really interesting to hear what she's doing, how she's doing it. She might be a great guest for us right here on the little things that she's doing that have helped to improve her blood flow, and especially having a sister like you that probably has her maxed on the right supplements. Um, that
yeah,
definitely, I'm sure, helps. And there are probably some really great supplements that people can use to help reduce their risk, improve their blood flow in both their legs and their heart that you work with your patients on and probably even take yourself.
there's several that I really feel are important, especially in the realm of heart health. My top five are typically your B vitamins, your omegas, magnesiums, CoQ10, and then vitamin D has a great role in supporting your blood vessel health.
I have a question though about vitamin D.
Okay.
Do I need to take vitamin? I just bought it the other day, and I was always told I need to take vitamin D with K2 MK7. And my dad's functional medicine practitioner said, because I went to buy it there and I noticed that it didn't have the K2 MK7 in it. And I was a little bummed because that's yet another pill then I have to buy. And it was D3 5000. And she said, actually, you don't want to take too much K2 MK7 because it can lead to clotting. And she said she's never taken D3 in combination in anything else. And especially she won't get it combined because if she thinks she's going to be on the verge of getting sick, she will up her vitamin D and she doesn't want to up her vitamin K2 MK7 along with it. So she just does vitamin D3. What is your philosophy on that?
So obviously it's individualized, personalized medicine when we get into that. Typically we just go with the D3 at first, like that's prescription. When many of our patients, their providers are giving them a prescription, it only has the D3 in it. But I will say sometimes when we recheck a D level and it's not improving with just D3, then like those people need the K2 and the stuff to help with absorption as well. And we're not looking at extremely high doses. You are not mega dosing on it. You're looking between 2 and 5,000 IUs a day to kind of get a targeted level. 40 to 80 is what I look for women to help support bone health, your energy levels, your blood vessels, and help to regulate your inflammation. So I'm for K2 in many situations. But I do know, like, affordability wise, and if you're getting a prescription, it is just going to be the D3 piece of that.
Okay. So I'm not going to, nothing's going to happen if I just do the D3 5000. But if my D levels don't reflect the D vitamin that I'm taking and the amount that I'm taking, then I want to consider the K2 MK7 for additional absorption. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
That's good to know. Um, that brings me to, you know so much about this, and part of your inspiration to really get into this is your own personal experience with heart disease and a family history, especially. And, I'm curious about how it is that you knew you had a family history of heart disease, but even into your, was it into your 40s, you had not been checked using advanced tools and techniques or advanced diagnostics, um, even with that. And I'm curious as to why.
Um, oh, so
That's
that,
a good question.
yeah, there's so many layers to that. So I will say, when I was about 44, I had an incident where I really felt like it was my cardiovascular system that was causing and wreaking havoc and causing this episode that I had. And I was seen by a cardiologist because of my family history and everything. And, I went from being able to bike ride like 10 miles every day, 30 some on the weekends, to like couldn't go a mile without being short of breath. And I was like, something is like not right. And so what it boiled down to me was because of my age, my insurance would not cover these tests for me. And so then my hands were tied. So it was like having to wait for the major event, which happened 2 years later, um, where I was having to push through everything and, you know, listening to my own body. And you feel kind of hopeless. Like you feel like, here I am, I'm a provider. I, treat people with their cardiovascular, I treat women in menopause and all of that. And here I can't even like get somebody to listen to me or anything. Like they knew I needed these things, but even with fighting for them, I wasn't able to get a heart cath. And had I had it earlier, I probably would have been able to maybe prevent the open heart that happened 2 years later when I had the dissection and full kind of 100% blockage of my LAD at that time. I had built collaterals because And you don't build collaterals unless you're pushing yourself to like exercise when you don't feel good. You're not rerouting those vessels and everything. And so I would push myself for 2 years until like it was like a ton of bricks come down on me and there was nothing else I could do but to like recognize this. And I still had to like argue it. Like I do not feel well.
It is so interesting you say that. And I don't mind calling out an organization because it's just the truth. And if the shoe fits, I was a Kaiser member here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they're all about thrive and they're all about prevention. And when my dad was diagnosed with heart disease at 78 years old, of course, he's had it before, but then my younger brother went and decided, well, I want to know if I'm at risk. His doctors refused to do any sort of advanced testing. So he decided, because he had the money on his own, in Austin, Texas, he went and paid for a calcium score, realized they had more calcium than he should have in it, and that was concerning. So he went to a cardiologist on his own, paid for a private consult, and the doctor said, you know what, we need to do an echocardiogram. And it was in that moment when he got the echocardiogram that he discovered that he had a bicuspid valve defect, and that if he continued on the same track of becoming, he was on his, as one of his hobbies was becoming a bodybuilder, and he would be dead in a matter, the doctor said, in a matter of 6 months you might be dead of a massive heart attack. And so thankfully he did that. So I decided to go to my Kaiser doctors and say, hey, I think I would love to be tested. At the very least, I'd like to have an advanced lipid panel to see if I even have an imbalance of those LDL particles, a whole bunch of those small, dense LDL particles versus the large, fluffy ones. They didn't even offer that test there. I asked them for a stress test. They told me that I was a hypochondriac. And what's
Yeah.
interesting is that fast forward, I ended up leaving there and going into a general PPO through Blue Cross Blue Shield, which covered everything. I went to a cardiologist on my own, and it was right after my mom ended up passing of an aneurysm, a dissection, that he said, you know what, with your family history, let's get a baseline for you. Let's get a baseline for you. That is smart. That to me is called preventative medicine, right? That's called getting ahead of it. And it turns out that I do have a small dilation in my thoracic aorta, which means I'm at risk for the same aortic dissection as my mom. And even more is I had a high number of small, dense LDL particles. And those are the ones that when they become um, you know, uh, what do you call it, oxidized by the trans fats and the free radicals. That's when they eke into the small damaged areas of your arteries. And I wondered why I was getting that damage. And so fast forward, turns out I had the MTHFR mutation. So all of this I was able to put together and literally increase my beetroot powder to prevent any sort of high blood pressure that would exacerbate an aneurysm. And number two is I was able to change my supplementation and my diet so that this MTHFR mutation wouldn't continue to lead to artery damage. There's so much people can do if a
Mhm.
doctor would just stop and listen.
Right. And take us as individuals there. Talking about that CT calcium score your brother had, I do want to say in women under 50, it's not the best reflection. So let's say you opt to do one, because I did. I opt to pay for one in my early 40s, and it showed nothing. And so then you really have to push. If you're having symptoms, even with a negative test, these tests are not perfect. So just remember that your symptoms and how you're feeling and what's going on should, pay attention to that. Don't ignore it because you said, well, I had this screen and it was normal. Just know, like, some things do not always catch everything. So if you're not feeling normal, still be checked out.
Yeah, it's symptoms plus imaging. And the doctors
Mhm.
actually pay more attention to the symptoms, or they should, than
Yeah.
even the imaging, right? And so you ended up, what were you thinking when they completely brushed you off? Were you worried about it for the next couple of years before you had that massive heart attack?
Um, it was,
Was it kind of caused anxiety along the
yeah,
way?
there was stress about it for sure. But then there was this mindset that I have was, okay, you're telling me nothing's wrong with me. There's nothing I can do about it unless an event happens or, um, my hands were kind of tied. So I really tried to push through how I was feeling, to exercise differently and try to push through being able to get back to where I was. And I hadn't gotten back to that, but that was my mindset. Well, I have no control over what my insurance will pay. I have no control over that. I just have control over what's in front of me. And that's the way I started to just go about things. It's like making sure I'm optimizing things, making sure that I'm adding my omegas, doing what I can in this situation is where I was. But there was a huge worry because I lost a grandfather at 52 during open heart. My mother passed at 57, my aunt at 60, my cousin was 32 with a stroke, my sister 40 with a heart attack. Like, it is so peppered in my family. It wasn't a matter of do you have it, it's when is it going to show.
And I just can't believe with all of that that no one did anything. But lo and behold, we're very thankful, of course, that you were able to survive the massive event. And it would be, I just for learning's sake for other people, I mean, it shouldn't have to get to the point of where you were, but you were very lucky that you were actually with someone at a restaurant that could actually act and help you in that situation. Not everyone has that because it wasn't like that with the first symptoms that arose early on in the day. And you were very lucky that you ended up going out and it happened, the massive event happened when you were with your friend. Can you bring us
Yeah.
back to that day?
Yeah, so during that day, I woke up feeling like I had heartburn, never had heartburn before. And so I was going about my day. The day before I had like worked my full-time job. I teach also, have for 19 years. So I went to that in the evening, graded papers, did all this stuff, and I was living my life. But by 3 a.m., I just wasn't feeling well. And the day progressed, and I went to meet a friend for lunch, and I got up to use the restroom, and I had this pain that went from the front to the back, and like half my vision was black. And I was like, I do not feel well. And she was like, that's it. This is not heartburn. I'm taking you to the ER. And it was right down the road from where we were. But I honestly, like, because of the person I am, I was like, I'm not canceling this lunch, even though I feel bad. So I was really like, you know, things align for a reason, right? And, she recognized this was cardiovascular and was like, you're going to the ER and everything. And even there, they were like, because of my age, because of like what was going on. And I even had negative imaging then. Like the imaging that I did was negative. My troponin started to raise. And so that's when I knew I was having a heart attack, but I didn't know that the vessels were tearing until Dr. Phillips the very next day did a heart cath. Like he come in and at first thought it was pericarditis because I was a woman in my 40s. Like, what are the odds that I'm having a dissection and I'm having a heart attack and like may not live if I went home. And I had just a very little bit of nitro drip that was controlling things, but I didn't sleep that whole night. It was like lonely, dark. I didn't feel good. And I still remember like the nurse, he sat on my bed with me. And honestly, like to me, he was sent from God to like get me through that. Like he was so caring. And the next day when I was cath and they were like, she's dissecting, I heard Dr. Phillips say that. And I knew what that meant. And all I thought was, oh, like there's a huge chance I'm not going to live through this. And I was just like, I need to talk to my kids. There was all this fear, this weight of like everything hitting me like, man, could this have been something that was prevented, or could this have been something that we detected before I hit this day, this moment? And yeah, you feel alone, you feel scared, you feel like defeated in that because you're like trying to say you don't feel good. You're trying to say, hey, I can't do what I used to do, but yet nobody's hearing that. So,
And it's still, of course, it's very emotional for you going back. And I think part of that is literally, I can't believe that they waited 24 hours to do something.
yeah. I
And
actually had a provider come in when they transferred me to the hospital and asked me why I thought I was there. And I said to get a heart cath, and she said no, and she dismissed me. And so then I sat that whole night feeling so awful till Dr. Phillips come in, like, you know, knight in shining armor. Like I love that man to death. So
yeah, Dr. John Phillips, with Ohio Health, one of the
mhm,
most caring individuals.
yeah.
He takes every single patient to heart,
Hmm.
literally. And I just can't believe, though, that you were at one hospital, they transferred you to another.
Hmm.
But the fact that they weren't taking you seriously, even at that point, what was their excuse or reasoning for your symptoms? Did they just think that you might have been
Par-
overworked or
Pericarditis. They thought I had pericarditis, that inflammation around the heart that just makes you have chest pain. But it wasn't until I actually got the cath that it unfolded everything that was really happening. Like, so the imaging for me looked normal, it's so crazy thinking back to all of that. Like my body was barely showing signs of things yet, but it was because I was young, and these young women, like your body has this incredible ability to like heal and stay on top of things and work like it's supposed to. And my body was doing that. It wasn't showing anything abnormal. But when I didn't feel any better and he turned off the nitro to see how I did and my blood pressure rose, he said, "We're cathing you right now." I wish I'd have seen him the night before. I wish I wouldn't have had to sit through that night, feeling so lonely and everything. And I wish that the provider, when I first got there, would have called in the cardiology team and like considered that, but they
because
didn't.
why did it need to get to the point of a dissection?
Yeah.
Why did it need to get to that extent? And that was the thing, even with my mom with her aneurysm. Well, how did five doctors miss that with textbook symptoms with her dissection of her aorta? How
Yeah.
is that possible? And one of the reasons people always give is that, well, for 80 or 90% of people, it is that pericarditis. And because you end up being that rare exception, we have a friend of ours in the group, Douglas, and he has this axillary bifemoral bypass that is blocked, and no one will listen to him that it's possible that the graft is compressing on his artery when he sits on his either one of his arteries in his legs, which cuts off his circulation. They're like, oh, well, that would be really rare. But what if they're that one person?
Hmm.
What if you were that one person? I mean, I'm just thinking logically, the moment that you would tell me that your sister had a heart attack at age 40,
40.
that your relative had a stroke at age 32, mom passed in her 50s, dad passed, like all these different things, I would think it's not too early. She's not too young. So, what is your best advice for a patient in this situation? I mean, I always say, just in case of any patient in our network even thinks they're having heartburn, we send them to emergency. And we just do, because that was my dad's symptom as well. He didn't typically get heartburn. And even when he took the bromo seltzer, he said he burped, and the chest symptoms, the heartburn seemed to go away. But it was the heartburn feeling that indicated that he was on the verge of a heart attack.
Hmm.
And again, as well with you. How can someone advocate for themselves? What hope does anyone have? I mean, you're a provider.
Yeah.
You would think that they would listen to you. So what hope do any of us have in being heard? Do you have advice for someone like me or any of those that are watching?
Well, I think you know your body best, right? Any of us out there, we know our body best. And if the no is the answer you get, find the next person who will listen. Like you, sometimes we have to seek on this journey. I had seen multiple providers, I had seen multiple cardiologists before I met Dr. Phillips. And I know they're thinking you're a woman, your age, you're stressed, you have this high stress job, whatever your situation is, but you know your body. And so don't you be the one to dismiss yourself. So
That's really good advice. I know it's really hard if you are on government healthcare or if you're in, the NHS. Um, to be able to advocate, you always have to go through your GP, and that GP is the gatekeeper. And if you can't get past the GP, then you can't get to a specialist a lot of times. The key is really getting to know that GP and really making sure you sit down before you go to those appointments and write down every everything. What are those key points that a woman should be writing down as they prepare for those appointments if they want to be taken seriously for heart disease and being assessed for a potential heart attack or
right. So
being on
I think most of the time when women come in and they say they're fatigued, that gets dismissed. So pick into those other symptoms that are going on because it's like a provider's eyes glass over when you say you're fatigued because that's a laundry list of things. So if you're having any chest pain, shortness of breath, if your exercise isn't what it used to be, like when you work out, if walking out to your driveway and to the mailbox, you're feeling like short of breath, like those symptoms as well, heartburn that isn't relieved by a heartburn medication or something, those other things. But when we go in and we say we're fatigued, it literally is like glassy eyed, like, oh, she's a woman. Like I've been gaslit so many times for that symptom. So, and I know many women that have. So pick into the other things. Are you, having shortness of breath? I'll really pay attention to those. What's your blood pressure when you're home? That's real important as well too. Like, are you getting a raise in blood pressure as well?
And we do have an app through the Global PAD Association. It is designed for people with peripheral artery disease, but even if you don't have it, it's a really good app to use that has a dashboard that you can share with your doctors where you can start tracking your symptoms, really paying attention to your exercise regimen. And in the end of every single session, it asks you, what were your symptoms? Was there any difference in your experience today versus yesterday? And over time, and especially if you're at risk, especially if you have a family history, this is really key. Even if it means you need to do it just a few times a week for multiple years before it paints a picture for you that you could suddenly go back 2 years ago and go, wow, 2 years ago, I was going 30 minutes without slowing down at this particular pace. But now, 2 years later, don't blame it on old age. Don't lead the witness. Don't look for excuses. How often, as women, do we look for excuses for our symptoms and we ultimately brush them off ourselves?
That's why I say don't brush yourself off. Like, understand how important you are. I have this conversation a lot with people, but recognizing one, how important you are to your family, to the others around you, and that your symptoms, however small you may think they are important to recognize and that you feel well. And if you don't feel well, whatever that looks like let's figure that out. Like, get with somebody who will help you to figure that out so that you do feel better. It is not normal to feel tired. Like that's not normal to always feel tired. It's not normal to have shortness of breath and have pain in your legs when you're walking. Those are not normal things. Some of it can be micronutrient deficiencies, things like that, but bigger picture, like find somebody who can help you figure that out and navigate that.
It's a good point on the shortness of breath because when my dad was short of breath, I remember he called me from his rotary function and he said, Kim, oh my goodness, I literally went up 3 stairs and I can't, I'm short of breath. And I immediately ended up getting a hold of his cardiologist, and lo and behold, he had a right coronary blockage, right coronary narrowing. The right coronary is a big thing. It can impact your breathing. So that's definitely something to pay attention to. And that's what I specifically, even if it's not the right coronary, because it could be other arteries that are causing and narrowing, significant narrowing that could be causing that as well. I always, when a patient tells me they're short of breath, I always tell them to say that to their doctor. Hey, I'm wondering about my right coronary. And I know doctors hate when you, diagnose yourself, but sometimes it does take a little extra, a high gain question
Hmm.
that's more informed to get a doctor to think differently and along the lines of what you're thinking from your experience as nurse practitioner Deidre said in knowing your own body.
Yeah.
And I know Beth is on, and Beth has her own experience, right, Beth? With she had a similar situation with an LAD blockage, the Widowmaker.
Yeah,
And what were your symptoms going in? Were you brushed off at all by anyone along your journey before you ultimately ended
I
up?
actually, yeah, I actually was for the longest time. I was having like pinching sensations in my chest. I was having the shortness of breath. Um, and I kept going to my primary care physician. And this was actually before I even had a cardiologist. And, you know, and it was just like something wasn't right. And, I was laying in bed one night, and this was like in like August, and I'm not good with numbers, and my memory is not that great, but it was like in 2015. I was laying in bed doing a webinar, and all of a sudden it just felt like a ton of bricks. Now, mind you, I'm laying on my stomach, and it just felt like a ton of bricks just on my chest, and I'm laying on my stomach, and I thought I was having an asthma attack. So I got my inhaler out. I took a couple puffs off of that and went out to my boyfriend, and it just didn't go away like I had expected it to. And I'm like, something's not right. I need to go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital. They ran all kinds of tests and they couldn't find anything. Every test that I had done at the hospital came back normal. Every test.
Wow, did
And
they do a CT angiogram, like a
yep,
256 slice CT scan
they
of your
ran,
heart that shows the coronaries?
yep, every test came back normal. And so, I put up with this for months. And finally, you know, my PCP, and this was in Iowa at the time. And finally, my PCP got tired of me complaining. I'm like, there's something going on. Something's not right. So she got me in to see a cardiologist, and he says, we're going to get you in and we're going to do a heart cath on you. So thank God he did, because he went in, did the heart catheterization, and he just happened to find a 90% blockage in my LAD valve.
It's always amazing that how they miss that, but they say that in even a 256 slice, it could be, the angle of it, and they may not they may not see it, right? And so um Dr. Paragdoshi, who is what we call a CTO expert. He's one of the pioneers in crossing chronic total occlusions or 100% blockages in the coronary arteries. He developed quite a few techniques to do that, he spoke to the Global PAD Association's network and said, one, fatigue is the new angina. And
Mm,
number two, the best scan that you can get, in his opinion, is what's called a PET scan. It's positron emission tomography. It's a type of imaging that helps the doctors see how your organs and tissues are functioning, and involves injecting in a radioactive tracer, which is absorbed by certain organs and tissues, which allows for the detection of not only heart disease, but even some cancers as well. So it is worth asking for a PET scan. We've had patients, nurse practitioner Deidre, that have gone in for even a stress test or a nuclear stress test. And one of them ended up having a massive heart attack in the parking lot following their consult with the cardiologist to talk about the results. And another one ended up dying that night from a massive heart attack at home. And one was had a stress test with normal results, and the other one had a nuclear stress test where they inject the dye with normal results. And so it's really concerning. You have to, make sure you're not leading the witness, make sure you're not trying to impress your doctors, make sure you are documenting your exercise and any symptoms that may seem normal, and don't come up with excuses as to why you might be feeling that way, especially if you are a woman, and we tend to do that, right? NP Deidre, any
yeah.
final thoughts, final pieces of advice?
Just, listening to Beth as well, it really boiled down to, even if you have normal test, pay attention to your symptoms. And for both of us, it was that catheterization that found the true problem that was going on. And so I really just advocate for yourself. Know that a test can be normal. It's not perfect science, right? We have all the best tools, but it's not perfect. So if you're still not feeling well, listen to your body, advocate.
Great advice. And if anyone wants to inquire about your practice, where can they go?
Um, my website, aspirewih.com. We have LinkedIn, Deidre Arms. We have YouTube channel here. We have Instagram, Facebook, all the things, all the social media things at Aspire WIH.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, nurse practitioner Deidre. We really appreciate you being here. And thank you so much for your courage to share your story as well, because I think a lot of people will learn so much from this. And I hope that this segment during National Women's Health Week is going to help not only